Hello, good evening. Hi, Natalie.
Hi.
Hello. So today is the 24th of June, and here in Germany, it's almost 8 o'clock in the evening. And with us, we have Natalie. Thank you very much for joining us, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, thank you for having me. So I'm Natalie. I am 20 years old and I've been living in London for almost 2 years now. I moved to the city after college to work at a film production company, and before all of this happened, I loved to go to gigs. I really love to travel, and I would film all of my travels on my YouTube channel. And I just love to make the most of the city. Um, that's me. Yeah, I grew up in Somerset, which is a rural part of southwest England, so moving to London was great for all the culture that is here.
And just before we continue with our interview, just out of curiosity, where did you spend lockdown? Was it in London, or where did you go back home, or?
So my lockdown was split into two parts. So on the weekend just before lockdown was announced, I had a trip booked back home to see my parents anyway. So on the coach, expecting that I wouldn't come back for a while, and that was the case because lockdown was enforced. And I spent about 8 or 9 weeks at home with my parents, which was really lovely. But then I moved back to London on the 8th of May because we had some new people moving in and I wanted to be here. And yeah, that's where I've been ever since.
Okay, so a little bit split. And
Yeah.
you already told us a little bit of what you do and what you did also before the COVID-19, but is there anything else that you'd like to tell us or that you can tell us of how it has changed? So you told us that you used to go to gigs and so on, and obviously with the lockdown and social distancing, that was a little bit off. But were there other things that you had to change? Like, how did you have to reinvent yourself?
So for me, it was just moving everything that I did in person online, or I would just dedicate spaces in the house for reading and stuff. So where I would normally go read in a cafe, I would make myself a cup of tea and go sit on this particular sofa at my parents' house or in my bed. I would just really try to normalize everything. So yeah, lots of things were brought digitally, like some club nights that I was going to go to. They did like a live DJ set on Zoom. So instead of going to a physical club, you would just put Zoom on and dance around your room instead. Yeah, it's just been adapting everything so I can still do the things I love, just in a little bit of a different way. But I tried to keep that normality because otherwise I would probably just flop on my bed and stay on social media all day, and that's not great for your mental health at all. So yeah.
It's a very positive way of seeing it. You know, you're not losing something, you're just changing it a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So I like that way of thinking. Anyway, so moving a little bit away from you and more about the country you're in. So the UK, London. Tell me what is going on right now. So what is it that you're seeing in the news? What's the topic that people are talking about? What is the concern that people are thinking about or having?
Sure. So the big thing that's in the news right now is the fact that yesterday our Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced that from the 4th of July, places like pubs, restaurants, cinemas, and hairdressers and museums, a couple of cultural things, are allowed to reopen. So a lot of what's in the news right now has been focusing on the businesses that are trying to rebuild their cash flow again, how safety measures will be put in place. They also announced that the 2 meter social distancing rule has been minimised to 1 meter. And I think a lot of what's in the news is related to the economy and how the businesses reopening is going to affect that. That's the big thing right now.
That's the big thing. And did they say anything of why the change from 2 meters to 1?
Apparently, it was because scientists had established that the risk from 1 meter is no different to the risk from 2 meters. So they were talking about how places like pubs couldn't possibly survive if everyone had to stay 2 meters. So I think it's partially for the economy that they've actually reinforced that now, or they've instated that it's 1 meter, so more people can go to the places that are opening on the 4th of July. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a very difficult situation to be in, obviously, as an owner of a business, but also, I guess, as the government that needs to think about the economy of the country, right? That's the main thing that's happening everywhere in the world, really.
Yeah.
One of the things I saw a few days ago was that, you know, how Spain was opening their borders, and the UK, a lot of UK people obviously do go to Spain for holidays. It's summer, it's hot, and they were not gonna impose a quarantine. Have you heard about anything about that? Like, what are people back home saying or wanting to do? Or because from an outsider's perspective, so I'm in Germany right now, so just looking at the situation in Spain and the UK, both countries were and are in a pretty bad shape, right? So one country that didn't do so well opening its door to a country that's not doing so well.
Yeah, it's really difficult because I think some people are really delighted. They've already booked trips. Some of my friends actually have already booked a trip to Madrid like weeks and weeks ago for August, and they invited me, and I was like, I probably won't come. I just don't feel quite safe yet. Because you're right, both the UK and Spain had, they had to enforce a really strict lockdown because our, what do you call it? The curve was going higher and higher and higher. Obviously, we're now way past the peak, but movement between the two countries maybe isn't the greatest idea to me. So for me, a lot of the things I've been seeing on social media, half the people are really excited about it, and half the people are saying, I'm just going to take it easy, I'm going to just be cautious for now. I guess because, like, for me, I don't want to be caught up in a rush of people going as well.
Also,
yeah, so it's very, very split.
It is difficult. I mean, I was looking at the numbers earlier before our call just to make sure that I knew them well. And from what I see, the UK, as it stands today, has over 306,000 cases, and it has 43,000 over a little bit over 43,000 deaths. And then we have Spain, that is also almost 300,000 cases, you know, and yeah, it's very difficult.
When you look at it, it's pretty much it's 300,000 cases. It's the same as us. We're both,
basically, yeah. And it's very difficult everywhere. For instance, here in Germany, we have done relatively well compared to other countries from the very beginning. So we have felt safer, and our lockdown was not as strict as the one in Spain or even the UK. But at the same time, recently, we've had a couple of big outbreaks that have made the government and a little bit nervous, let's say. And there's an area where I live in one of the regions of Germany that is actually going on lockdown because they need to figure out how far the virus has spread, right? And that makes you think how everything and anything can change in the blink of an eye, right?
Exactly. I watched the Prime Minister's announcement today because I knew it would be a significant one, and he did emphasise that all of these new measures are reversible. So if people are going to be irresponsible, there were a lot of lots of massive raves, massive parties, maybe 600 people going to parties in the UK in the past few weeks, which, that's people at once, that would probably be classed as something quite irresponsible. So he has said that if things like that continue and people aren't being as safe as they can, then they might take away the privileges. And it kind of sounds like a teacher at school. If you don't stop being naughty, I will take away the playtime or something. Like, it feels like that.
But yeah, it's but unfortunately it has to be like that up to a certain extent, right?
Yeah, definitely. Because
with
if more outbreaks happen because of the eased measures, then we need to take back.
Yeah, it's too contagious of a virus, and the problem is, even though we're 6 months in, almost 7, there's still so many things that we don't know. There's too many variables that we are unfamiliar with, or they need more studying, and too much. And before we continue to our next question, tell me a little bit about the social distancing and the mask face cloth wearing. How is it in London? How is it back home where your parents are at? Just give us a little bit of an idea of the face mask situation.
Sure. So with the face masks, it's been made compulsory on public transport. However, they, like right now, all of these things, like you should wear a mask when you go to enclosed spaces like shops, are only guidelines. They are not enforced by law. So it's completely your choice whether you want to wear a mask or not. I've seen lots of things that have said that the risk of passing on or catching COVID if you're wearing a face mask is significantly reduced. But back home, my mum works in a supermarket, and here when I go to the supermarket, I see that most people aren't wearing masks. I'd say maybe 30% are not wearing masks, and my mum has said the same back at home. Even though it's an enclosed space, I think because it's not been enforced, there's been no messaging apart from on public transport from the government that says wear a mask, you should wear a mask. It's just not in general circulation from the government, so people haven't been taking to it. It's, I'd say 30% are wearing masks and maybe 70% aren't, unless it's public transport.
Okay, yeah. The mask conversation has been a very difficult one in this whole pandemic. There's been too much, yes, with reason, but a little bit too much of change of opinions, and then that adding to the confusion, and then problems with the communication in a lot of countries, not only in Europe. But like you said, there have been more and more studies that show that wearing a mask, of course, it's not the solution. We already know that. It is just a piece of the puzzle, let's say. It does help. But if you wear a mask and you don't do social distancing, you're not going to be completely safe. But if you do both, the risk of getting infected, it is lower. And especially wearing a mask is not for you, right? It's the most unselfish act that you can do in the end, right? Because it's for the other person.
Exactly.
So, but going back a little bit towards the past, you already mentioned a couple of things, but just from your experience, from what has happened, just remind us a little bit how the events developed, like in the UK, from the first cases to when certain measures were taken. So yeah, when was the first measure to stop the spread? Just tell us a little bit about it.
Sure. So I remember seeing reports coming in from China and then from Italy as the virus started to spread. And I remember maybe early March, the government's first advice that I can remember is wash your hands. And if you sing happy birthday twice, then that's a good amount of time to wash your hands. And that was the clearest message they gave, to wash your hands. That was probably early March. that was the first thing. And then as things developed, this actually wasn't something I remember from the government, just something I remember seeing on social media mainly, was just you should start to socially distance, start maybe not to go to pubs, maybe don't see your friends, but this was never official until lockdown. So that I remember being, again, like early to March. I remember the last time that I saw friends in person was March the 13th, and then lockdown was imposed on, I think, the 21st of March. So it was about then is when people were like, actually, let's start to stay in a little bit. Let's not go to crowded places. Let's not meet up with loads of friends. That was it.
That was it. So that shows, I mean, sometimes, and of course I kid, but sometimes social media is good, right?
Yeah.
You were aware of it and you took care of yourself and took action before the government even started talking about it or saying it.
Everyone that I mean, I know social media can be an echo chamber. You tend to follow and interact with people with the same opinion as you, but my whole time on Twitter was just full of tweets, like to Prime Minister, I actually don't know if he has a Twitter, to MPs, members of Parliament, saying you need to enforce a lockdown now. Don't wait until it gets bad. Do it now. Lots of us are already doing our own sort of lockdown by not going out too much and not meeting friends. But there was like so many people that I knew asking for them to do something official. Yeah.
And I mean, like you mentioned earlier that you had been looking at reports from China and from Italy, and in the end, Italy, I mean, it's right there. Europe, like right around the corner, and things started getting really bad in Italy towards the 22nd, 23rd of February. And that was in the north, and then it spread, and then the lockdown was on the 8th of, the national lockdown was on the 8th of March. So a couple of weeks before the government.
Yeah, exactly. Lots of people saying, look at Italy. Oh yeah, I remember people saying, look, we are 2 weeks behind Italy right now. Please enforce lockdown. And obviously they didn't. They did it in 2 weeks. And then we hit the same stage as Italy. Actually, I think we were maybe worse than them. So that was very frustrating for everyone, because we'd been asking our local MPs, please, 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 take this into Parliament, please. Yeah, it just didn't happen.
I mean, you just said worse than Italy. From a case perspective, new cases, considering the amount of time there was lagging, right? The time that could have been helpful for the UK, those 2 weeks. We said the UK, I'm looking right now, the UK has 306,000, a little bit, so almost 307,000 cases. And Italy has 238,000 cases.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just goes to show, there it is, right in the numbers.
Yeah. And right now, at least in the website that I'm looking at, which I know with certainty that the Italian numbers are 100% correct, because I also look at the government numbers. The deaths are also lower. We have 34,000, Italy has 34,000 deaths, and the UK has 43,000 deaths.
Yeah,
the numbers. And as we mentioned, if I'm not mistaken, earlier, before we started the call, the numbers that we see now are not really the final numbers, right? These are only the numbers that are confirmed, that are reported.
exactly.
So
we don't know the actual figure.
Yeah,
which is kind of scary.
It is. It's especially considering that it's been just like a few months, right? Because really the big numbers started, the deaths at least, they really started in March, right? Yes, you had a few before, especially in China, but for the rest of the world, they really started in March, let's say, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier again that you had been looking at the reports from China and Italy and had been looking through social media, and you took matters in your own hands, right? Decided to socially distance from people, stop hanging out with your friends, and so on. But tell me, was there a specific moment? Was there maybe something that you read or something that someone said? Like, when was it exactly that you got a little, like some goosebumps, let's say, and thought, this is actually worse than what we thought or I thought, more serious?
Sure.
Tell me.
So there was a day, and I'm trying to figure out the exact date in my head. I believe it was actually Friday the 13th of March. It was the Friday before everything kicked off. And I remember going into the office, and where I work in London, it's a very busy street in Zone 2 in Dalston. Lots of locals, lots of people who work there, lots of shops around, so very busy. And I just remember walking down the street and just being very aware of everyone around me, as if, like, you know, if I could see like a glow of virus around everyone, like, oh my gosh, it could be anywhere, I could have it. So when I was in the office that day, I was completely alone, and I just felt really anxious. It's the type of nervousness that you have maybe before an exam when you know something's coming up. And I just couldn't get rid of it. So I bought myself like a nice lunch. I usually bring a packed lunch, but I bought myself a nice lunch because I was feeling really nervous. But that was when it felt like it had changed for me, when the energy in the city just felt really like looming, like something was about to happen, and obviously it did. So yeah, I just remember that day. I think, I'm not sure if we'd had the first death in the UK yet, but obviously we'd seen that it was starting to rise near us, and offices were starting to shut, places were starting to close, and it just hit me on that one Friday. Yeah, just made me feel really nervous.
I mean, you described it really well. I could literally picture you just feeling uncomfortable and really aware of your surroundings. And of course, it's always good to be aware of your surroundings, especially in a pandemic. But in a moment from one day to another, feeling that way, it just feels like you described a clip of a movie. So
Yeah, it really was like flick of a switch, wake up, and then from that day it was just, yeah, really strange.
really strange. And what about your parents? I assume that day you spoke to your parents and told them how you felt. What did they say? Oh, Natalie, come on, or
No, I mean, they were very understanding of it, because my mum had been to the Philippines about 2 weeks, 3 weeks before that to visit family, and she was saying how she was worried about picking it up over there or bringing it back or being at the airport. Luckily, she, touch wood, hasn't had coronavirus, but she was saying that she felt really nervous travelling. Both my parents, because I was due to come back for a visit anyway, they did encourage me to pack a little bit more and maybe stay for longer, which I did, and that turned out to be a really good decision. But both of my parents they key workers, so my dad works at the post office and my mum works in a supermarket. So for them, they just adapted to the new measures at work. They went out there 5 days a week to work. But yeah, I don't know if they felt as anxious as I did, but I suppose down in the countryside, it's not like you've got loads and loads of people in your face all the time, as it is in London. So I think it was a little bit calmer down there, and
yeah.
felt a little bit more normal for them.
Yeah, and you feel a little bit more comfortable, right?
Yeah,
Than in a packed city like London. But
exactly.
thank you for sharing that story. Like I told you, I completely pictured you on that Friday the 13th on top of it.
Yeah,
Could it be?
so ironic.
Very much so. And now, getting a little bit more serious, I'd like to know, so based on your experience from the very beginning, how things have evolved in the UK, from what I understood, you're very active on social media. At least you do pay attention to what's happening around the world also, and happening around your world. Based on the news that you shared with us today, based on what's happening, tell us a little bit, what are your hopes? What are your concerns? So what is it that you think is going to happen in the next few days, in the next few weeks? What is it that you don't want it to happen? And what is it that you think will happen?
Sure. So my estimate for the next 2 weeks, or like sort of, yeah, 10 days to 2 weeks, because that's when we'll hit July the 4th and we'll see how the world looks when things are open again. My hope is that we don't reach another peak, and that cases continue to fall and deaths continue to fall. I've noticed that despite all the protests, which I think have been great, actually we haven't seen an increase in cases really. Like, the trend hasn't gone up, I don't think. So I'm hoping that means that transmission between, like, when pubs open, that transmission will be less likely. I hope that that's what will happen. I hope that people will be respectful of each other. You know, mates asking their mates, do you want to come out today? Do you want to go to the pub? I hope that no one will be put under pressure to participate in social activities just because we're allowed to. Doesn't mean that you have to if you feel uncomfortable. So I hope people will continue to be kind to each other. It's hard to predict what will happen because this whole thing has been so unpredictable already. It's really hard. I can't predict if cases will go up again or they'll keep declining, because, like I said, the protest, people were concerned that might transmit the virus a little bit further, but it doesn't seem to have done. So I'm hopeful that, you know, with social distance restaurants, that won't do it either.
Yeah. I mean, with the protest, yes, a lot of people, I was very concerned. I understood the reasons of the protests, and of course they are good reasons, but in a pandemic, I was a bit scared. And of course you have the difference, right? One thing is if you are outside, most people wearing masks, and you keep on moving, right? And you're outdoors. But another thing is if you're cramped in a place indoors with barely anyone wearing masks, right? And no social distancing.
True.
So that does have an effect, right? But I like your hope, so let's just stick to your hope, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. To be optimistic.
Let's be a little bit optimistic. Realistic, always realistic. So like you said, be kind to each other. Don't feel forced. Don't force. And just be careful, and let's really have a little bit of hope, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I like that message. And last message to finish our interview. If you could give a message to yourself. So if you could give a message to the Natalie that is going to be with us in 14 days, what would you tell her?
So, Natalie, in 14 days, first of all, hello. My message to you is keep working hard, and don't forget to give yourself breaks. I know you're really ambitious right now. You're applying to university, you're trying to read 3 million books, you're trying to do your 9 to 5, you're trying to keep active and do your exercise. But just remember that you can only do so many things in one day without exhausting yourself. So keep productive, but make sure you rest, because it's a very strange time and everything is like 5 times more exhausting than usual. So yeah. Goodbye, future Natalie.
It's a very straightforward message. Take care of yourself. You want to do it all, and you should want to do it all, but just take care of yourself, because there's stressful times, and And there's only one Natalie, and we want her to be okay in 14 days, right?
Yes, we really do.
Yeah, we really do. Natalie, it has been a true pleasure having you on this Wednesday, very hot evening. I know it's hot over
Yeah,
there. It's like I'm boiling right now
so
also.
hot.
Yeah. And it really has been a pleasure talking to you. And I will see you in 14 days.
See you in 14 days. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You
Bye.
too. Bye.